Daniela, welcome to the mother of all talk shows. Wonderful to see you again, looking wonderful. Let's dispense first with the very auspicious and somber anniversary, that the 80th anniversary of Pearl Harbour and the attack on it more particularly meant to the people of the island. Was it much commemorated? What was the form, shape of the commemoration?
Sure. Yeah, thanks for having me. Good to see you again. And we say we'll never forget the attacks on Pearl Harbor. It does show that we're not all safer when you're an occupied nation. You said colonize. A lot of Native Hawaiians consider our nation still existing but occupied because, in fact, the United States recognized in 1992 that the overthrow of our government was illegal and illegitimate. There was a resolution that Bill Clinton signed that said so, but of course, there's nothing that they did in restitution in order to, give any teeth to that resolution. But they did recognize. So, if it's not actually colonized, it's occupied. And we've seen time and time again that we're not all safer because of it. And sometimes we can even be worse off. The most three polluted spots in Hawaii are on or adjacent to military bases. We call them EPA Superfund sites here, Environmental Protection Agency. And most recently, they poisoned our water source here with petroleum, jet fuel. It's
well, I wanted to talk to you about that, but just before we come on to it, how overbearing, how large is the U.S. military presence in Hawaii, and is there any other U.S. presence other than military? Is there a big U.S. civil society program in Hawaii, for example?
Well, 1/3. So the majority of the population of Hawaii is on one island, Oahu. About 90% of our population is on this island. And of that island, 1/3 of the land is controlled by the federal government of the United States. 22% of the island is controlled by the military. So we're really reliant on the jobs and the economy, but that's on purpose. And if you actually break it down, like where are these jobs going? Can civilians even apply for them? Are they good enough jobs where you only need one job to survive? Generally, the answer is no. And these are government jobs, meaning that if we just diverted those funds, so instead of paying to build weapons and, our livelihoods depend on the death and destruction of others abroad, if we just diverted those funds to create jobs for our own human needs, we'd all be much, much better off. So there's idea that but we rely on military. And from a lot of us in the Native community and the environmental justice community, that therein lies the problem. That reliance is actually the issue.
And how are relations between the occupying military forces and the local people?
Well, over time, we're in an American education system. We're in an American value system. So we were taught from very early that we are much better off when they're there. So a lot of the older generations are staunch defenders of the military presence, but a lot of the younger folks and Native Hawaiians in particular, and immigrants who are displaced from their own land who are now here because of the U.S. military have a different perspective. So you're seeing that sort of alternative, more accurate view rise up as time goes by.
Now tell us about this water pollution. This is a story so extraordinary. Tell us what happened.
Right. So this connects to Pearl Harbor. So when we were attacked by Japan, the U.S. decided to house a lot of kind of up their presence here. So they had a lot of jets flying in and out. I mean, that was the strategy of being in Hawaii in the first place, of having that jump off point in the Pacific. So they needed fuel. So what they did is they buried massive tanks under hills right above our water source, right above the aquifer. So the reason why these gas tanks were there is for this ancient war that no longer exists. So there's no reason to still have these gas tanks still above our aquifer, and it's been slowly leaking out. They've been concealing that fact for a long time, and kind of the long-term impacts and the chronic impacts. But recently, it sort of bursted open. It's really only this thick, the tank, like about an inch thick. So it leaked into our aquifers. We saw petroleum in the water fountains at elementary schools. We've seen babies from military families being rushed to the hospital. Nearly 3,000 military families have evacuated their own homes for Christmas, and it's really sad. And you're seeing the Navy actually covering it up, kind of saying it's worse, not as bad as it is. But the people know better. The State Department of Health is at odds right now with the military, so it's a real crisis. But the people are rising up. The people are standing up, and this is a rare opportunity where you see folks that identify as like pro-military and conservative standing with folks who've been asking them to leave for a long time.
And what scale is that on now? And are the U.S. government taking it seriously?
The scale, it's hard to tell, because they're trying to obscure facts and minimize the impact, or minimize the perception of the impact. But there's at least 60 to 80,000 residents that are being impacted, and I don't know, like in my community, which isn't even really close to the source, restaurants are being precautionary and they're like serving bottled water for free instead of tap water. And you can kind of see it. Like when you pour a glass of water, you can see there's something off. They're purposely trying to not avail the data. But yeah, it doesn't look like they're taking any real action. Native Hawaiian leaders, environmental leaders have written to the president, making sure that he's aware. We heard back that, yeah, he's aware, but we haven't seen any action so far. It's like civilian control of democracy is supposed to be a tenet of American democracy. Like that's part of the American promise. But this is just yet another example of fascist hypocrisy.
The American dream. Problem is, you've got to be asleep to believe it. Kanila Ing, thanks very much. I wish you a speedy return to the Hawaiian Legislative Assembly.